friends, this is the Miss Wolfie from our half-acre homestead, and I'm making pork pies today. Okay, here I have 2 ham steaks. Now these were way too salty, so I'm going to use them in my pork pies. And I have 2 pieces of, probably 2 pounds of bacon that's getting old. That was in the freezer. So we're going to turn these into a pork pie. Now for this, I've been waiting for pork to go on sale. These are loin roasts, and it was $12 for the 2 of them. Now they have some bones in them, so we're going to have to trim, but it's basically 2/3 fresh pork and 1/3 cured. And the only seasonings I'm going to use, because these are salty, is a bit of sage and some pepper. Let's get started. I have my meat grinder with the largest disc so that it's more of a coarse grind rather than a fine mince, because normally I would do this by hand, but I'm not dicing all this up by hand into a fine mince. So let's grind it. So ideally you would want a roast with no bone, but these were on sale. And guess what? I can cut these bones out. Let's start with taking just the bigger pieces of meat off. I can put these bones in the crock pot and we'll have a nice rich soup tomorrow. See, there's a lot. These are loin roasts, and they were only $2 a pound. But you're paying for the bone, so I put the nicer ones that looked like the loin chops bone in. I put those in the freezer. I got a couple of these. Alrighty. Yes, my clock needs to be wound. I've ground up my roasts, and what I have here is 2 beautiful sets of bones and rib tips. I'm going to put these in the crock pot with cold water, and I'm going to let these simmer overnight because we're going to need the broth, and you're going to need some gelatin as well. Okay, now that I have ground my pork, and it's working out. And I'm not even going to take my spices. These are my these were not smoked hams. These were pickled hams. So if you want to use back bacon or pea-meal bacon for this, that would be fine too. But these came out really salty. And if you're using store-bought bacon, folks, you may want breadcrumbs to put in your meat because it just may be too mushy. I'm going to dump the pot back into the meat bowl. My bacon is not store-bought bacon, which means it's not full of water, folks. It's not been impressed with liquid smoke and stuff. It has been smoked. So I don't think I'm going to need breadcrumbs, but we'll see. Now the bacon. Bit of meat going in, I'm going to put 1 piece of bread through the grinder just to help clean out all the meat and to add those breadcrumbs I talked about. Okay, I wasn't recording. I have roughly 10 pounds maybe, 6 pounds of fresh pork, roughly ground, and 4 pounds of ham and bacon, to which I've added just a bit of ground pepper and about a teaspoon of sage. Now, since I have so much of this, I'm going to make a small pork pie in a springform pan. And I'm going to use a large muffin thing for my molds. It's old, it's rough, but I usually line it with stuff. So our meat has been thoroughly mixed. And I also have 1 20-inch by 2.5-inch collagen sausage casing, just in case I have meat left over. So first things first, We've got our clean cutting board, and I've put parchment down. And we're going to start. Now, my pastry is still somewhat warm, but you want it warm because it's moldable, okay? So I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it in here, and then I'm going to press a jelly jar right down in and continue on. I don't even know why I bothered to put flour down. Now I'm not cooking the pastry in these tins. I'm just using them as a mold. And you know what? I think I'm going to put parchment in here too. This is something Miss Mary taught me when we was down in Ohio. I'm going to put a strip of parchment in here, then my dough, and that way it'll be easier to get out. Like so. Now these will not stand alone when the pastry's warm, folks. So that's why I am putting them on a plate, and they will go in the fridge to cool. Now I'm making my next batch of shells, and I'm going to tell you that this pastry works better if it's a little bit cooler, and it molds better if you make it into a little like 3/4 inch thick plate. Like that. Dip my jar right in flour and push it and give it a little twist to let the flour work to loosen from the pastry. Okay, there's another set. I'm going to let these chill right in here, and I'm going to start on our larger pork pie. Okay, I have wet my parchment so that it'll fit better. And I'm just lining this small, loose bottom pan. Now there's a reason why I'm lining this small, loose bottom pan with parchment. Because once I put the pie in here, and I fill it, and I chill it before it goes in the oven, I'm going to be taking it out of this pan. And I'm just going to tie a string around the parchment. Okay. Now remember, folks, I said leave enough for lids. It looks like you got lots, but not necessarily. All right, here we get our pastry, and it's still warm. Now remember, this is a standalone pastry, so you want it nice and thick. You want your plate to be at least 1/2 inch thick before it goes in to your pan. Now let's see. And in that goes. And now we just start working the pastry up the sides of the pan. I put this in crooked. Try and put it in centered so that your pastry is evenly thick all the way around. Maybe it'll help if I roll it. That might work, actually. I'm just using a jar and rolling it to the inside of the pan, which works better than my fingers. You want to make sure there's no breaks in your pastry wall, or it will not hold together. Not bad. All right, let's fill this puppy. Also, that your ham and your bacon and your pork is really well mixed. Like I kneaded this with my hands probably, there's a piece of grizzle in there, probably for a good 3 minutes. All right, so I'm just going to take, and like I did with the pastry, kind of make a plate that will fit down inside, just like that. And then we're gonna push this in almost to the top of the pastry. Now let's go get our other ones. Now while the pastry is chilling, I'm gonna go ahead and make my lids just to make sure I have them. Now your lids don't have to be as thick, but you do want them covering the whole pie. Now we need 12 of these. One. And I make these a little bit thicker though, because if they're too small, then I can roll them out a little bit. I'm just taking this big fat ass straw, this big fat straw here, and I'm poking holes in the lids. Why? Because when I'm done, I want to be able to pour the cooling jellied broth into the pie. Now I put these in the freezer to chill because, well, I'm kind of pressed for time. So now I'm just going to take a ball of meat, and you're just going to press your meatball right into your pastry shell. Meatball works best because it spreads easier into to fill the whole thing. And as we put these on the cookie sheet, I'm just going to pinch the lid. I'm going to bring the other pastry or the shell up around, and I'm just going to pinch this all into place. I have noticed that you don't want your shells too chilled because they firm up too much and then you can't pinch your lid into place properly. We're going to take our last piece of hot water pastry. I probably made more than I needed to, but you know what? If I have some left over, I'll just make Pop a pasty, which is just like a turnover with meat in it. Again, you can't hurt this pastry by overworking it, folks. This is the one time you will hear me say you can't overwork this pastry. All right, now before I put the top on, we're going to take this out of the pan. I don't feel it warm in any way, so I'm just going to set this jelly jar upside down and very carefully push my pan down. And now what I'm going to do before I take it off the plate is I'm going to just take some kitchen string and tie it around the parchment, just to kind of hold everything together in case you don't want it bellowing out at the sides. And again, this is a standalone pastry. A lot of people will partially bake it in the pan. I am not a lot of people. And I'm going to put another one around. Don't make it too tight. You don't want it cutting the parchment or the pastry. You just want it holding the parchment in place. Put paper on this because my pie is already on parchment. Look at that. You'd think I knew what I was doing. Okay. So I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to trim all the way around the bottom from the pan for my lid. How easy was that? And now I'm going to poke not one, not two, but 3 holes because it's a bigger one. Now, like the small ones, We're just going to rest this in. Put it back on the cookie sheet. You don't want to handle this too much. Okay. And again, like we did with the small ones, you do not want any of the juice leaving this pie if you can help it. Why? Because the juice is going to be full of gelatin. And that's one of the things that makes a pork pie, is after this is cooked and cooled down, we will add the gelatin. Or we just might eat it the way it is. Okay. So here are, now you want to preheat your oven to 425 degrees. And we're just going to coat all these with an egg wash. You're going to bake these for 25 minutes. But we will leave the larger one in just a little bit longer. Brush some egg wash on Daddy's lunch. This is a lot, folks. But again, these are all going to be individually frozen for Daddy's lunches. And he won't get them every day. These are going into a 425 degree oven for 25 minutes. Or until the crusts are golden brown. This will probably leave in for an extra 10 minutes. Now this one needs to cook a little more. And they all do, because I've turned this down to 375 because I didn't want them to burn. But Papa's, is the juice running clear? Papa's lunch looks quite ready.
Whatever. You pepper everything.
You really should taste it first, honestly. Watch it, that's really hot, baby.
Should have made me some chips to go with it.
What do I look like? Betty Crocker?
No, my darling bride. Let's go.
That's ham, bacon, and loin roast, all ground together and just a few extra seasonings added. Yeah. Now, could you eat them cold in your lunch?
I probably could.
Because they're meant to be eaten cold, eh? Well, there you go. Thank you, dear. Okay, so we're in the pantry here, and here's our pork pies. Now, remember the straw I poked the hole with? Well, the holes get a little bit smaller, so we'll just give them a little punch. And what I've got here is a cup of my bone broth. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing here. I got a cup of my bone broth, and I've stirred in a tablespoon of gelatin. And you just keep going around and pouring the broth in. You should let it cool down a bit, but I put a lot of gelatin in this, so it will probably gel up pretty quick when it hits the cold meat inside these pies. Now, these will all be individually wrapped and frozen. For Papa's lunches, he can take one of these and a sandwich and a piece of fruit, and that's a nice lunch for him. This will be a supper one night. This is the Miss Wolfie from our half-acre homestead saying, cold or hot, nothing beats a good English pork pie. Take care, God bless.